All right, so section 414, we're going to be writing out polynomial expressions ourselves. We're going to write equations, okay? And the way we're going to do it is we're going to take the answers they give us and use those to write those equations. And it's relatively simple to do, or at least to set up. Maybe to do might be a little tougher depending on how good you are at distributing and stuff like that. But let me show you what you're supposed to do. So right here it says find the polynomial function if its roots are 2, -3, and 5. In other words, the answers are 2, -3, and 5. So look what I'm going to do. X is 2, x is -3, x is 5. Okay? So the way we're going to write the answers is you're going to take the opposite of the answer. So instead of 2, I'm going to use -2. Okay? And then I'm going to put an x next to it and put it in a parenthesis. Instead of -3, I'm going to use +3. And I'll put an x next to it. I'm going to put a parenthesis. And instead of 5, what am I going to put? A -5, right? Just change the sign. And this is your function. Now the hard part, if there is a hard part, they want you to distribute this. Okay? They don't want you just to leave it like that. This is a perfectly good answer, but that's not the answers they're giving you. It's, by the way, your homework is all multiple choice. That means you just got to pick the right solution, right? So we're going to have to distribute all of it. So let's go ahead and start by distributing the first two parenthesis sets. So x times x, that's x squared. X times 3, that's 3x. Again, if you want to use the box method, feel free. It works just as well. -2 times x is -2x. And -2 times 3 is -6. Now I'm just going to simplify this. So 3x minus 2x is 1x, so it's plus x minus 6. I still have that x minus 5 there, okay? It's just kind of trailing. But now, I got to distribute that. Okay? So instead of a 2 by 2 distribution, I'm doing a 3 by 2. 3 terms by 2 terms, okay? So this one gets a little bit more weird looking. But let's do that first. So this would be y equal to x squared times x is x cubed. X squared times -5 is -5x squared. Now let's do the middle term. So the middle term here. So x times x, that's positive x squared. X times -5 is -5x. And now let's do the -6 term, the last term. You'll notice I kind of exaggerate the loops whenever I draw them for the last one, or else you kind of get lost. So -6 times x is -6x. -6 times -5 is positive 30. The last thing you have to do is just combine your like terms and you're done. Okay? So let's combine like terms. X cubed is all by itself. -5x squared plus x squared is -4x squared. So let me highlight in case you're wondering what the heck did I just do. These were like terms right here. I got another set of like terms right here. So -5x minus 6x is -11x, and then plus 30, and you're done. This is the equation that they're looking for. Okay, so you're going to get the answers they give you. You're going to write them as factors in parentheses, but use the opposite sign, right? So instead of 2, I used -2. Instead of -3, I used +3. Instead of 5, I used -5. And then it was just a lot of distribution or a lot of box method, whatever you prefer. Okay? Whatever you prefer, we can do, but it's a lot of that stuff. And then just simplify and you're done. That's it. Okay? It's not hard work, well, it's not a hard concept, but the work can be tricky sometimes because when you're multiplying, you don't want to get lost, right? So just be careful with it. Okay, take your time. Any questions on this one? Because I'm going to show you 3 examples. Each one is different. None of them are very much the same. Because there's a lot of questions that look like this one with just normal answers, like 2, 1, 0, stuff like that. But some of them will look like this. So let me give you a little bit of time to write that down. I'll pause it. All right, so for example 2, we're going to find a polynomial. Again, we're going to write an equation. But the zeros, notice I use the word zeros instead of roots, right? The zeros are -2 multiplicity 3. So what does that mean? How many times does -2 pop up?
3 times.
3 times, right? That's what multiplicity means, right? So it's going to be x is -2, x is -2, x is -2. So my factors are going to look like this. Y equal to x plus 2, x plus 2, x plus 2. Like I said, that's not hard to do, like to set it up. Like the idea is simple, but then here's the hard part, right? Is making sure you don't make mistakes in your multiplication, right? So that's always the tough part. So let's go ahead and start doing this multiplication here. So we're going to do the first 2 here. So I get x times x is x squared. X times 2 is 2x. And then I'm going to do the bottom loop here, 2 times x, 2 times 2. So 2 times x, that's 2x. And 2 times 2, that's 4. And I still have the x plus 2 hanging out at the end. I'm going to simplify that middle term. 2x plus 2x, that's 4x. Oops. 4x plus 4. And then this is the part where, like I said, it gets a little messy because now we're doing a 3 by 2. So 3 terms times 2 terms. So again, just take your time. I'm going to start with those. Okay, x squared times x and x squared times 2. So it's x cubed plus 2x squared. Actually, let me move this down. I just remembered I got to have enough room to loop it. So give me a second. All right, now the middle term. So 4x times x, 4x times 2. So 4x times x, that's positive 4x squared. 4x times 2, positive 8x. And now the last term, 4 times x, 4 times 2. So 4 times x is 4x, 4 times 2, that's 8. All I have to do now is just clean it up, and I'm done. Okay? So my like terms, I'll highlight them, these 2. And my other ones will be these 2. By the way, they don't always show up in the same place. Sometimes they're separated. Depends how you multiply. Okay? So don't think like, oh, it's always these 2 and these 2. Like, no. Pay attention to the powers, right? Square terms are like terms. First power terms are like terms. So my answer is going to be y equal to x cubed plus 6x squared plus 12x plus 8. So if you see something with multiplicity, just know it happens a certain number of times. If they say multiplicity 2, then it's just 2 answers like that. If it says 3, it's 3 of them, right? And you're just basically rewriting. Remember, the whole point of this is they're giving you the solutions, and you're going to write them as factors, but with the opposite sign. okay? The opposite sign. That's the most important part. So, all right. Any questions on this one? Because there's one more that has to do, there's two problems on your homework that have to do with imaginary numbers. And there's a little trick to those. So, all right. So here's the last one. I'll pause it while you guys write it. All right. So for example 3, we're going to find the polynomial function if its roots are 2 and I. Remember, I is an imaginary number. Why did I say this is tricky? Because you might say, well, that's not so tricky. One of the answers is 2. The other answer is I. Okay. The reason why it's tricky, you have to go back and remember how we used to write complex numbers. Complex numbers always had a plus minus. That means that even though you don't see it, there's one more answer there. Okay? Even though you don't see it, there is one extra answer. If you see a positive I, the negative I is there as well. Maybe they don't list it, but it's there. If you see a negative I, the positive I is there. Okay? So anytime you see imaginary, make sure that you have a pair. Okay? It's always a pair. So that's why this one's tricky. But after that, not that big a deal. So here we go. So let me write down my equation. Y equals to, what do I write? X minus 2. X minus I, yeah, and then X plus I. Now I'm gonna give you the biggest hint that you'll ever get with these things. Whenever you have to multiply imaginaries, always do the imaginary stuff first. Do not distribute x minus 2 times x minus I. Do that later. Okay? Always do the imaginary stuff first. So I am going to start here. So let me write this down. Y equals x minus 2. All right, x times x, x squared. X times I, well, it's just xi. Now do the bottom one here. Negative I times x, negative xi. Negative I times positive I, negative I squared. Let's clean it up a little bit. Positive xi minus xi, that cancels. And what's this going to come out? Negative I squared. Isn't that negative of a negative 1? Because I squared is negative 1, right? So that's actually 1. Remember, this will cancel right here. So minus an I squared is minus a negative 1, or minus times a negative 1. So that becomes a positive 1. And notice I don't have a 3 by 2. I still have a 2 by 2. So my multiplication is going to be easier. So let me go ahead and do that, and then we're done. So x times x squared, x times 1. So y equals x cubed plus x. And then negative 2 times x squared, negative 2 times 1. That's negative 2x squared minus 2. So let me just write it in order. X cubed minus 2x squared plus x minus 2. And there you are. So me personally, I prefer the imaginary problems. I think they're easier to do. Okay? Because you always want to multiply the imaginaries together. So remember, they always come in pairs. Multiply the ones that are in pairs that look alike together first. Okay? Any questions on this one? All right, let me give you guys your homework. Today we have